All right, as they're doing that, there are sermon notes inside of your bulletin. I hope that you will take those out and follow along and absolutely go home and think about that this week. Hopefully, my goal every week is that you will have thoughts to ponder and scriptures to read. I was going to have them show a video without me giving you a prelude to it, but I don't think that's fair because how many of you have brought your brains this morning? Okay, you're lying. You have to use it. I was going to show this video without telling you. I totally disagree with the video we're about to watch. So if you're out there saying, why would he show that in church? Well, or you're going to say you love it. But one way or the other, use your brains as we watch this video, okay? Let's start off, see where we go.
Fail, not because they don't have the ability. It's because they don't have the heart to go through adversity.
The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it.
You'll go through some failures.
When you're in that darkness, you want to sit there and wait for the light to come. But you can't wait. The only way out is to step forward, to face your fears, to become your own light. There's going to be a lot of times y'all about to fail. We are all a work in progress. But in that moment, I want you to remember the power of you. You will change the world.
Even when you're struggling, even when you're discouraged, and you feel like other people have given up on you, don't ever give up on yourself.
The indomitable will, if you have a belief you can do something, the only way you grow that, like in the gym, you grow your muscles by actually exercising them. To grow the individual will to become something, you must get comfortable with fear and failure. They must be your best friends. They're the only one that moves that needle of life. Every hero you guys had was called an idiot, crazy, a loser. You must break society's status quo. Status quo is normality. It's alive but not living. It's death on a stick, guys. The belief of the individual overrides thousands of people with just intent. Safety, comfort zones are dead zones. You have to continue to push yourself because your true potential will never be matched, guys.
Nobody is gonna hit as hard as life, but it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. Now, if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth, but you gotta be willing to take the hits.
The future rewards those who press on. With patient and firm determination, I'm gonna press on. I don't have time to feel sorry for myself. I don't have time to complain. I'm gonna press on. Stop complaining. Stop crying. We are gonna press on. We've got work to do.
What's your why? What motivates you? What pushes you? What drives you? And if that thing is internal, if nobody has to call you, if nobody has to prod you, if nobody has to reward you, if nobody has to give you anything, if you are self-motivated and self-regulated, you can have it, you can be it, you can do it.
Take ownership. Take extreme ownership. Don't make excuses. Don't blame any other person or any other thing. Get control of your ego. Take ownership of everything in your world, the good and the bad. Take ownership of your mistakes. Take ownership of your shortfalls. Take ownership of your problems. And then take ownership of the solutions that will get those problems solved. Take ownership of your mission. Take ownership of your job, of your team, of your future, and take ownership of your life and lead to victory.
It's possible you can live your dream. It's necessary that you have a plan of action, that you're resilient, that you stick to, and you work with the system, that you have the vision and never give up, that you become creative and relentless and keep on coming back again and again and again, and that it's you that you got to take personal responsibility to make it happen, and that it's hard. Easy is not an option. And when life knocked you down, jump back up and said, it's not over until I win.
That's a pretty popular motivational talk that started. And to be clear, part of it is just total rubbish, hogwash. And then there are truths mixed in underneath all that that also make it sound great. And we get these mixed messages all over the place. And one of the things I want to talk about today is how contrary that message is to the gospel. Because, I mean, you think about it, there are a lot of themes in there, a lot of so-called important things that I'm sure in a seminar they would break down. But halfway through, you might remember it said, you become your own light. You become your own light, and you can do whatever you want to do, and you can be whatever you want to be. Really? Is that how this works? And by the way, when's the last time any of us were actually able to do whatever you want to do and be whatever you want to be? You know, we watched the Super Bowl last week, which some of you are not bad chili cooks. I'll have to admit that. But last time I checked, only one quarterback was on a winning team for the Super Bowl. Is that fair? Was there more than one, or was there just one? So how many other quarterbacks in the world have worked as hard as they could work to be the Super Bowl winning quarterback, and they ain't it? A lot. So you're telling me if I just motivate myself and I work as hard as I want to work, that I'm going to win the Super Bowl like Tom Brady? I can do it because I'm me, and I'm my own light. Drew Brees might love to have a couple calls back. For those of you who follow that, maybe he thinks that should have, might have. The point in this is that we hear this message from the world that when you face battles and when you face unknowns and when you face challenges in life, you know, what you need to do, well, you need to be your own light. You need to, you know, life has knocked you down. Now, that part of it's very true, isn't it? Life is hard and life is not fair and life does beat you up. We all agree with that. But the answer is, like Rocky, and there's actually a quote from Rocky, if you recognize Sylvester Stallone's voice in there, when life knocks you down, the key is to get up and keep fighting on your own strength, on your self-motivated strength. That's how you overcome. Is it? That's how you win. Which leads me to the next question. Okay, win what? You think about Tom Brady. He's won everything, hasn't he? How many? 6 Super Bowls now? You know, whatever his wife's name is, Dak Prescott's talking about how, well, he can afford to take a $10 million pay cut because look what his wife makes, you know? So, I mean, apparently Tom Brady has won everything. And yet, as soon as the Super Bowl was over, he's already answering questions about, I think I'm going to come back next year. I'm not going to retire. How come? Isn't he satisfied? He won. Isn't if you win, doesn't that mean you've arrived? And if you've arrived, doesn't that mean you're content? How many of y'all think Tom Brady's content today? If you read my blog this week, I talked a little bit about Jeff Bezos and Amazon. If you follow that story, you probably know he's the richest man in the world according to the stock market today, I think. 150 billion plus net worth. And come to find out, he's been cheating on his wife. They're getting a divorce. And who knows what other kinds of ugliness are behind the scenes there. Wouldn't you think if you had $150 billion, you could stay married? That would do it, wouldn't it? I mean, if you've got problems in your marriage, well, just think of the other people, because I know you don't. But if somebody said, here, I'm going to give you $100 billion, the only thing I ask is that you have a happy marriage with it. Would it do it? Would that be winning? And the answer is, of course not. The world says you can do it. The world says you be your own light. You motivate yourself. You get up when life kicks you and knocks you down, and you find it within yourself. And yet we all know we've tried that, haven't we? When you were kicked and you did get up and you did keep trying, and a lot of the times what happens is you get more frustrated. which is why we like these motivational speeches, because part of it is we do understand you do have to get up and you do have to quit, laying on the ground and complaining. We do have to stop making excuses. But what I would like to submit to you is we do need to stop thinking that our way is going to work. That's the problem. You are not your own light. You are not your own narrow path. You are not your own way, and you do not have all the answers that they somehow want us to think that if we just get motivated enough, we're going to find. As a matter of fact, studying Forbes this week, there are some reasons why most people do get up, but they don't make any progress. I've listed these for you, and I just thought we'd talk through them. One is you just don't have the energy for it. You need to fix some of these things. You need to address some of these things that have kicked you in the ditch, and you're just tired of dealing with it. And you're just, I just don't have any more energy to devote to this. You think about problems within marriage. You think problems with dealing with your debt, problems with work, whatever. It's like, I'm just so tired of dealing with this. And we don't. Can you all relate to that one? You don't believe that good outcomes are possible because you've tried to fix this. You've put some energy into it in the past, and what has it gotten you? Often, more of the same. Pride. I can fix this myself. If I keep doing what I'm doing, eventually my way's going to work. We'll talk about that one in a minute. Oh, and by the way, I don't want to hear that my way is wrong. The truth is, my wife's way is wrong. And if she would get fixed, then our marriage would get fixed. Or I don't want to hear that my way is wrong. The truth is, my workplace is wrong. And anyway, we don't know where to start. One of the things when I talk to many of you one-on-one, which, by the way, my Starbucks door is always open. And I mean that. I will always meet with you if you want to meet to talk about it. Because a lot of times when people are stuck, they're like, I don't even know where to start. Well, it depends on what perspective you're taking in terms of where the starting place is. We feel incompetent and inadequate. Sometimes we're just lazy. We have this victim mentality that honestly, none of this is my fault anyway, so if everybody else would change, everything would be fine. We have a fear of conflict, because we know a lot of times when we address those underlying problems, it means we're going to have to confront somebody who's been mean to us. And that takes courage. The biggest one is you just don't think you can. And I think that's why motivational speakers are so popular, because you get to a point where you're so tired, you're like, I've tried, I don't know what else to do, and you need somebody to say, you can do this. Get up, quit making excuses, quit being the victim, and keep working. The problem with that is, if you get up and keep working and you buy into this motivational stuff, which some of it is total garbage, but you're working at it the wrong way, you're not going to make any progress. It's the old, if you put your ladder on the wrong wall, every step you take is a step in the wrong direction. If you're on the wrong road, every mile you drive is a mile you're going away from where you need to be. So, we do need to ask the questions, I think, of ourselves and of the world's message. Can you really do anything you want to do? Can you be anything you want to be? Can you be your own light? Can you be your own solution? Can the world be your solution? And let's be really clear. Jesus says emphatically, no. John 15:5. Sometimes Jesus speaks in parables, and sometimes it is black and white. We can argue about the parables a lot. You're going to have a hard time arguing with me about some of these black and white scriptures, and this is one Jesus, I think, did not intend for us to be able to have controversy over this one. He just said it really clearly. And again, when Jesus says it, it's important. Jesus says, chapter 15 of John, verse 5, without me, you cannot do anything. That's a big statement. The world says you can do anything. You just get up and you keep working. And we get images of football players or baseball players and, boxers and all this kind of stuff. And yet, with 32 teams in the NFL, how many players have not made the NFL? With all of the baseball teams in AAA and AA and the majors, how many baseball players, how many parents did all this kind of stuff and spent all this kind of energy for their child to become all they could be, to be one of these major league players, and they didn't make it? You think the list is short or long? It's just another great reversal from Jesus. The world says you can be your own light, you can do it. Put on Nike shoes, you can do it. And Jesus says, no, you can't. God says, no, you can't. Why? That's a big, big question. So, staying here in John, by the way, I always encourage you, bring your own Bible, write in it, take notes. If not, take notes on the notes I give you. But I really hope you'll go home and ponder these things in your heart. Again, the Christian gospel says Jesus is the enfleshment of God, God coming down here to talk to us, which is basically the perspective of the omniscient, all-knowing God who created the universe, coming into our little bitty anthills and saying, let me open your eyes to some of these bigger truths that you'll never see on your own. So, important stuff. In John 16:33, again, all this is in the same context, so a lot of truth here. Jesus says, I've said all these things to you, which is all this stuff that he's been saying. A lot of context. So that you will have peace in me. In the world you will have distress. Notice, God doesn't say in the world you're going to have peace. In the world you're going to discover and find peace. He says, no. In the world, you're going to have problems. So on that part, the motivational video is right. The world is going to knock you down. But be encouraged. I have overcome the world. He does not say, be encouraged. You can overcome the world. Get up. Keep trying, and you can overcome the world. It's not what he says. He says, I bring you peace. I have overcome the world, which to me is a really important place to start. Who will overcome the challenges you face in life? We're talking about embracing life's unknowns, so part of the unknowns really is the idea that we have challenges in the future and we don't know how it's going to work out. That's some of the big ones. You got a problem at work, or you got a problem with your marriage, or you got a problem with a health concern, or you have someone you love and you can't fix whatever it is going on with them. And there are all these unknowns, and the truth is we kind of know a little bit, but we don't know enough, and so we have concerns and anxieties and worries. How, right, do we overcome these unknowns in life? On your own strength? By continuing to do what you've been doing? By continuing to have the same perspective that you've always had? Albert Einstein, many of you have heard me use the quote, I just love it, but he says, you're never going to solve a problem using the same consciousness you had when you created the problem. And we look at that, we're like, well, I didn't create this problem. And his point is actually, you did, because the problem is always inside your head. Our problems in life, it's not so much the problems, because we always have problems. What he's talking about is, if you have the right perspective, then a problem is not necessarily a problem. It's all about perspective. Given that, in Romans 12:2, which is another great verse, God tells us that if you want to transform, or in other words, overcome a problem, always, it starts by a renewing or a change of your mindset, of your perspective. And that is so contrary to the world, because what we say in the world is, if you want to overcome a problem, then your external circumstances need to change. So you work really hard, right, to either make more money, or to get that person who's wronged you to apologize and be right to you. You know, if you've got a problem with the car, you got a problem with that, it's always when your circumstances change, then the problem is going to be solved. And both Einstein and God agree that that's not really how this works, because your perspective is what matters. And what Jesus tells us is, I think the corollary, one of them, there are many, if you want to overcome your problems, the first key fundamental is your perspective ain't going to work. You need God's perspective. God has overcome the world. God can overcome your problems, but it starts with us developing God's perspective regarding our problems. I want to stop there and let y'all sit on that for about 3 seconds, because this is very important stuff. It's one of those things that I've been thinking about all week. How do I talk about, I mean, I know this is so true, and yet over and over again, I see even in my own life where we just don't believe this. We think my perspective is good. My philosophy on this, my worldview on this, my solution for this is good, and God, I pray that you bless me in my efforts to do what I've already decided to do to solve the problem. What if God said, wait a minute, back up the truck. Let's start with you thinking you have the answer to this to begin with. Because therein lies the problem. Perspective. Perspective is so critical. Like, do we realize that your life is about quality, not quantity? So often, what we think is so important is live long and prosper, right? I mean, we think what matters is I want to have a long life, and a lot of times we take extraordinary measures to promote a long life, and we mortgage, and I'm not talking money-wise, we mortgage the present because we somehow think that we absolutely are going to experience the future. And so what we do, right, we are willing to fight with people today and have conflict with people today and have these issues in life that absolutely are not peaceful or joyful or hope-filled or all that stuff, thinking that I will experience those things down the road because I've got quantity on my side. Do you? Do you really? You sure about that? What if one of the messages God has tried to tell us since forever is it's not about your past and it's not about your future, it's about now. It really is. I mean, like right now. Like literally, right now. That God says to you, you're my child and I love you, and what I want for your life is what the Lord calls abundance, which means right now you are supposed to be filled with love and joy and peace and patience and goodness and kindness and gentleness, and not tomorrow. So that in and of itself, if you lived every day like it was your last, if you didn't assume quantity and you assume the most important thing in all of life is quality, when Jesus says what you were created to do is to glorify God with your life, when? Now. You can't glorify God in the future and you can't glorify God in the past. It is always a present concept. So if that is the case, and God's perspective is not one like we have of this timeline that we are born here, but God kind of looks at us as just, this is who you are. Now is who you are. How would that change how you deal with frustrations and problems and annoyances and unknowns and all the what ifs and if onlys of the past and future? I would submit to you it would change it a lot if we took this idea seriously. And this is one of the things I think Einstein and Jesus were talking about. You can't solve a problem using the same mindset you had when you created the problem, because the problem is not so much your external issues or what somebody else has done or someone else has said. The problem is how you're approaching them, how you're thinking about them. And not just you, all of us. The big idea, the really big idea, is that the starting point is not what you're going to do, but it's where you should be looking. The what comes later. A couple great scriptures. We'll read them both, Psalm 46 and Colossians 1. If you don't know Psalm 46, you ought to mark it and go memorize it. You're like, I don't need that. Well, you will. It's just a matter of time. Think about this psalm as opposed to the motivational video. Think about the contrast between what God is telling us and what the world wants to sell us. God is our refuge and our strength. You want to make that personal? God is my refuge and my strength. God is my help. He is a help that is always near, especially in times of great trouble and distress. That's why I won't be afraid or anxious or worried. That's why when the world falls apart, and some of you know what that feels like when your world falls apart because something tragic happens, something unexpected, something devastating, and you are literally punched in the face, punched in the stomach. If you know that feeling, you know what I'm talking about. It is literally like getting kicked in the stomach. And you're laying on the ground, and when the mountains crumble into the center of the sea, this is a metaphor, right, for how we feel. When the waters roar and the waters rage and the storms are coming and the mountains shake because of its surging waves. In other words, the whole world is falling apart around me. My world is cratering. God is my refuge and my strength. God is my help. He is always near in my times of trouble and distress. How does that compare to get up, be your own light, be motivated, you can do this? Folks, it's a very different message. In Colossians 1, it's actually quite a long passage, and we won't read it all, but I hope that you'll read Colossians 1 and 2 on your own and just think about these things. Paul, back in, and I won't go through it all, back in 2 Corinthians, his testimony, which is the point before, but he had been through a lot. I mean, you go through the list of things he had been through. He had been beaten, he had been flogged, he had been shipwrecked. I mean, he had just gone through so many things that most of us, I mean, we can't even imagine what that's like. We've been through some hardships, that's for sure. But Paul had been through really, really tough times, like physical pain and mental pain, just remarkable, really. But he'd gone on through all this stuff, and then these books, Colossians, Philippians, these are prison epistles, basically. So he's seeing the end of his life. So he's gone through all this stuff, and he knows he's about to be executed by the Romans. And so he's writing to these churches some of his most important thoughts and what he hopes that they will remember after he dies. He didn't know what he was writing was going to become our Bible, but certainly he did feel like these were very important truths that the Lord had taught him. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 19, there's a great verse here that talks about who Jesus is. As a matter of fact, we'll go back to 17. It says, he existed before all things. This is Jesus we're talking about, similar to John chapter 1. And all things are held together in him, in Christ. He's the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the one who is firstborn from among the dead, so that he might occupy the first place in everything. And here we go, verse 19. Because all the fullness of God, and that is a really deep, rich word in the original Greek. The Bible was written in Greek, not English, not King James, Greek. And this word, fullness of God, if you circle it and go study that word on the Greek, you'll find just pages and pages and pages. Anyway, the fullness of God, the pleroma of God, was pleased to live in Jesus. Drop down, just for time, we're not going to read it all, but in verse 27, given that the fullness of God was pleased to dwell in Jesus, God wanted to make the glorious riches of this secret plan known among the Gentiles, which is us, which is, here we go, Christ living in you. So where we have Christ, you have the fullness of God, the God who created the universe, deep stuff. And then Paul says the secret to what? To overcoming. The secret that he has found to going through all of this hardship and distress in his life, and at the very end of his life, he's still filled with love, and he's writing things like, rejoice always, give thanks in all circumstances, pray without ceasing, think on these wonderful things like goodness and kindness. Paul is still able to have a positive attitude in the midst of all this stuff. Why? How can any person do this? Have you ever known anyone who was going through a remarkably tough time, and they were like smiling and nice, and it's like, what's wrong with you? Don't you know you should be complaining? You meet somebody like it, it's quite remarkable. I've known some folks like that over the years, and you sit down with them when they're literally on their deathbed, and they're like, I just want you to know I'm good. I'm good. How are you so good? Well, I've learned the secret. What's the secret? It's not about me. Amber just sang it for us. Jesus, it's all about you. The pleroma, the fullness of God, God says, lives in you. That's another one that we need to stop, pull the record back, and think about what that means. There's a negative side to that. Every time you sin, every time you engage stuff you know you shouldn't engage, every time you do that stuff, you take the Lord with you. That's kind of scary. But there's a positive side as well, very, very positive. Where do you start when you're looking for solutions or answers or fixes to the various challenges that you're facing? Where, not what do you do? Where do you start when you're facing issues in life that the world's kicked you down? You're facing issues in life that you don't know the outcome. They're unknown, parents, kids, your own health, your spouse, your job. I don't know, right? We all have our own bag of tricks there. Where do you start? Well, Christ in you. Yes, you look in the mirror. Cameron showed me a pretty funny video of a girl, little bitty girl, who's looking in the mirror saying, you can do it, and I'm so awesome, and my house is so awesome, and because I'm so awesome and everything's awesome, we're all going to be awesome. Not quite. You look in the mirror, and then you say, yeah, the answer starts here, but it's not me I'm talking about. Okay? Every one of us in this room is going to deal with something this week. I promise you that. I don't know what it's going to be. Now, you can ignore it, and you can act like it, doesn't matter, and you can sweep it under the rug. Somebody's going to say something. Somebody's going to do something. Some of you are already dealing with some pretty monumental things. We're all dealing with something. If nothing else, when you walk away from this message today, I hope that you're going to be thinking, okay, wait a minute. Where do I start in overcoming this problem? And biblically, the answer is quite simple. It's not about you. You start with Jesus who lives in you. Why? Because God is my strength, not me. I actually don't have to have it within me to do this. God will give me what I need to do this. Where do I start? Well, I start with Jesus. Why? Because Jesus says, without me, you can't do anything, but in me, you can do everything. Because I've overcome the world. There's nothing Jesus hasn't overcome. There's nothing Jesus doesn't understand. That's why in Hebrews chapter 4, we are told, you draw near to the throne of God, and what you're going to find is God will draw near to you, and He will be your help in times of need. And as we begin with that perspective, then we get to, well, God, what do you want me to do? And in James chapter 1, we're told very clearly, if you ask for wisdom, matter of fact, we'll look at this one, and then we'll wrap it up, because this is also right after Hebrews. In James chapter 1, it is chapter 1. Hey, look at that, I got one right. James chapter 1, verse 5. This is another one we all need to memorize. So important. Anyone who needs wisdom. What is wisdom? That's the what. What do I do? What do you want me to do? Should ask God, whose very nature is to give to everyone without a second thought, without keeping score. And wisdom will certainly be given to those who ask. I don't think for a moment that means in your timing, which goes back to last week's sermon on patience. But God always provides wisdom for those who seek it. Which brings us here. Think back at least to one issue that you've faced in the last, say, week or two. It can be as simple as driving on the highway. It could be as complex as you lost someone you love. Where did you turn for strength? I would suggest to you that our natural reaction is to turn everywhere but to God. You know, phone a friend or a family, get busy on the internet, sweep it under the rug, act like I'm going to be fine, I'll just deal with it later. I don't know, right? We all have different tendencies, but our natural reaction is not to take a deep breath and say, okay, God, I know I can't handle this on my own, but I know you can. Was that you? And secondly, when you've made your decisions on how to move forward dealing with those issues, did you do so in a way that looked to the Lord Jesus Christ and said, please give me wisdom on how to deal with this, because I don't know? Or did you just barrel ahead, assuming that what you know is good enough? Where I want to encourage you, or I want to challenge you, the challenge is you can't do it. You can't do it. And if you think you can, you're in trouble. The gift is you can't do it. But Jesus can. And He will. If you honestly, sincerely surrender and seek His will and His way. If you would bow with me, we're going to take about 30 seconds. I'm going to ask two of our worship connectors to come up here and stand up here by the altar. What has God said to you through our time together here this morning? Where are places in your own life, in your own heart in the past week that you've kind of gone at it your own and not allowed the Lord to be your strength? For about 30 seconds, I invite you to open your heart to whatever God may be saying to you. Of course, if you need to accept Christ for the first time, that's great. If you want prayer, if you have a really big issue you're struggling with, look, Dan and James, they would love to pray with you. Please don't be self-conscious about that. We're going to do this every week now. If you want prayer, we want to pray with you. But for about 30 seconds, just give to the Lord what's on your heart. And here's the piece for today. Ask for His strength and His help for what you are wrestling with in life. 30 seconds, then we'll close this up. Lord, we love you. Thank you. You are our strength in times of need, and yet you also know how often you aren't because we don't ask and we don't look to you for our strength. So as we move through today and this upcoming week, we ask that you just help us to have a little better perspective on remembering that only you are light of the world, only you are bread of life, only you are living water, only you are the true strength that can give us what we need to move forward in life, to be the people you would have us to be and experience your abundance of peace and love and joy and hope. For everyone here, for those online, for our loved ones who aren't with us, we pray, Lord, that we might understand a little bit more your wisdom for everyday life, that we would know the height and the depth and the width and the breadth of your love for us. We would know your peace, which surpasses all comprehension. We might be your faithful disciples in the world today in this upcoming week. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, we're going to have a fellowship time. If you need to go, go, but I'm going to ask them to stay up here. If you want prayer, you come on up. But as we leave, if you'd stand, please find somebody you don't know and just shake their hand, say, God bless you, so glad you were here today. Lord willing, we'll see you next week. So we're going to have a little fellowship time, and then we'll just exit as you see fit. God bless you all. Thank you for coming.